Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on European forestry. I hope everybody can hear me. If so, welcome again to this session about the very interesting and vibrant forest industry in Europe. My name is Esben Brandi. I'm head
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Due to technical problems, I was invited to start with my presentation that will be on the EU policy environment relevant for forests and wood. When thinking about forests, different people have quite diverse perceptions on the manifold products and services that forests provide to society. Regarding investment and engaging in forestry and wood processing, this diversity is both a very good, promising opportunity, but also a huge challenge. It is an opportunity as some of the products and services are highly appreciated at markets, generate revenues, and offer investment opportunities that can result in increasing profitability. A well-known example of these opportunities, but not the only one, are wood-based products that are of increasing importance for the transition to a more sustainable and climate-friendly society. The grand societal challenges addressed in the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in the new EU policy orientations, can only be achieved if we phase out fossils and stop wasting natural capital. In the energy sector, this may be possible in the long term with renewable sources other than biomass. But even there, in the next decades, we will need bioenergy to enable this transition. For the manufacturing, for the material sectors, the situation is quite different. Fossil-based, finite, and climate-unfriendly materials need to be replaced as much as possible with renewable, more climate-friendly biomaterials, in addition to a better circularity of all kinds of materials. The transformation called for in the European Green Deal is simply not possible without using a broad range of bio-based material that can replace and environmentally outperform fossil-based ones. Wood offers many alternative solutions to serve the increasing material demand of a growing world population and to support the transition away from fossil-based products. The most important markets for new wood-based products seems to be construction, textiles, biofuels, platform chemicals, packaging, and some other niche markets. But the traditional wood products will retain a significant role also in 2030, irrespective of the diffusion rate of new wood-based products. The wood processing industries in the European Union hold a leading position at global level. While the forest area in the EU27 is about 4% at global level, the forest product export value of the EU is more than 40%. This industry in the European Union shapes the standards in the production of wood-based products and is a leader in innovation in all these fields, many of them seeing growing markets in the future. Unfortunately, this power and potential of the EU forest-based industries in turning wood into highly requested products is not well acknowledged in the current EU policy discussion. As I mentioned in the beginning, this diversity of forest benefits is also a huge challenge, as there are many services that are highly requested, do not generate the revenues, In the opposite, they rather limit the provision of marketable products. And two of these services gained high importance in the EU policy making, and this is carbon sequestration and biodiversity. This development makes again visible the divide in the European society regarding the role of forests and wood. One part of the society favors multifunctional forest management, more use of wood, and a strong contribution of the forest-based sector to the circular bioeconomy. The other part of the society favors reducing forest harvesting or even halting it at all to support carbon sequestration, forest ecosystem, and to serve conservation interests. Bioeconomy is perceived a threat by this group. The future development of the forest-based sector in the European Union depends on the social license to operate, on the acceptance to manage forest actively for multiple benefits, the acceptance of harvesting trees, and a multiple use of wood for many products and also for energy. And this social license is only partly issued at the national level, where the primary competence for forestry is. It is rather increasingly determined by policies and legislation at the EU level. These relevant policies at the EU level have become quite diverse and fragmented in terms of content and competencies. Each of these policy processes and fields shown in this slide has a specific view on forests and wood and specific requests, and they are quite diverse and sometimes contradictory. Coordination between such a large number of policy processes and areas is a major challenge to achieve coherence, a challenge not to lose the big picture. A solid and holistic understanding is needed to design policies that maximize synergies and minimize the trade-offs between the many different roles forests can play, while respecting the complexity, diversity, and the long time horizons that characterize the forest-based sector. Beside the risks emerging from climate change, for this sector, the growing risks emerging from policy change are relevant. A change away from the holistic view based on multifunctional use of forests towards a more narrow view restricted to a few prioritized roles. So what can we do to strengthen the holistic understanding and to enable the forest-based sector to use its full potential in contributing to the transition of our economy and society, a transition that includes a broad range of investment opportunities? Different people tend to have a good understanding on the forest roles they are familiar with or they know most, but often information on other roles of forests and the interrelations between these different roles is rather poorly understood or is downplayed. Therefore, strong engagement with society and decision makers is needed to inform, to raise awareness, and also to build trust. This communication endeavor should present the big picture of all the roles forests can have, of all the benefits they can provide, the diversity of situations we have in the European Union regarding the role of forests and wood in serving many different policy objectives, but also to explain the social and economic impacts that tend to be overlooked. Strategic partnerships are needed with those sectors that will in the future need more bio-based feedstocks to make their transition to a more climate-friendly and sustainable production. Joint efforts with these sectors in the EU policy making possibly have a stronger political leverage than the isolated efforts of the forest-based sector if it continues to act alone. Also, stronger collaboration with the finance and investment sector is needed and would be helpful, not only regarding joint efforts in the policy-making processes, but in creating business opportunities and investment tools, including payment for ecosystem services that meet the specific characteristics of forestry and wood processing and that would help to empower this sector to fully contribute to all the relevant policy objectives. In this respect, this investment summit is a very helpful contribution in this endeavor. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Harald, for that insightful presentation. I think I was dropped off as I was introducing you, and thank you for just starting, irrespectively. There's a few different things I would like to ask you and challenge you about after we maybe hear from our other participants. I had actually wanted to go to Karin Astrom, which represents the Rewilding Europe and is a program developer for Rewilding Europe. Looks like she is not online. So since she is not online, I'll then instead go to Manuel Estrada, who is the director of RED and land use at Verra, and is responsible for day-to-day management and evolution of Verra's work in reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation in agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. Manuel, so I understand you don't have a presentation as such, but maybe you could provide us with Verra's views on the relevance and opportunity for the voluntary carbon system to drive investment and opportunity, and to actually allow the forestry sector in Europe to actually take its rightful place in mitigating climate change and addressing the biodiversity crisis. Manuel, please.
Yes, Esben, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Let me first give you a short introduction of what Verra is, what we do. No? So Verra was created in 2005 by the Climate Group, the International Emissions Trading Association, AITA, and the World Business Economic Forum, and the World Economic Forum and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Our goal is to help tackle some of the world's most challenging social and environmental problems by developing and managing standards. Through these standards, what we are trying to do is to help the private sector, the governments, and civil society achieve ambitious goals, both in terms of sustainable development and climate action. So Verra right now serves as the secretariat for various standards, actually 8 of them, going from the BCS, the Verified Carbon Standard, which is the one that is more relevant to this discussion, no? To a plastic standard, for instance, that was recently launched. No? The BCS program, well, basically what this program does is to certify projects that turn their greenhouse gas emission reductions into removals into carbon credits. No? We have a similar program, but for jurisdictions, that was recently updated. And also worth mentioning is a program that we have for verifying or certifying community climate and biodiversity benefits. No? And this is a program that is being used at the same time as, for instance, the BCS by projects, so that they can certify both the emission reductions and carbon enhancements, and the other co-benefits, no? the social and other environmental benefits. No? So with this introduction, I wanted to give you an idea on the status of the carbon market. No, I mean, looking just about the BCS, I mean, to BCS, today the BCS has about 2,000 total projects, which have issued almost 454 million carbon credits, and more or less half of these, almost 500 million carbon credits, have gone from the AFLU sector. No? I mean, what we have seen in the the most recent years, I mean from 2016, is that in particular the issuances, I mean the creation of carbon credits in the affluent sector have increased like 3 times from 2016 to 2019. And this means that in 2019 we had more than 70 million BCUs, which is the verified carbon units, not carbon credits in the BCS system, in 2019. So now the size of the issuances for the creation of credits is more or less 70 million in 2019. No? But looking at the whole voluntary carbon market, you know, what it was recently reported by the ecosystem marketplace, the report that they publish every year, the state of the voluntary carbon market. They state there that the voluntary carbon market has channeled more than $5 billion into projects around the world since the voluntary carbon market started operating. You know? And this goes, I mean, this is not only for AFOLU, for agriculture, forest, and other land use sector, but also other types of projects, including renewable energy, clean cook stoves, and so on. No? And they have also reported that these projects have, on top of these mitigation benefits, have delivered substantial improvements in people's lives. I mean, contributing to the progress, for instance, of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. No? So we believe there is an important role for the voluntary carbon market in the fight against climate change. And this has recently led to a number of actions, no, particularly from in the private sector. No? So we have seen that in the last few years, 1/5 of the world's 2,000 largest publicly listed companies have committed to having a net zero emissions target, no? Which basically means that their emissions are going to be balanced with the carbon-based sequester from the atmosphere at some point in the future, normally 2030. No? So with this increased attention of the voluntary market, to the voluntary market, we have also seen like this call for a more organized market. No? So we have seen the establishment of the task force on scaling voluntary carbon markets by Mark Carney, who was the former governor of the Bank of England, and is the UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. No? And the idea of this task force is to develop concrete recommendations to scale up the voluntary carbon market by order of magnitude. No? The idea they have, but according to their analysis, no, to meaningfully support a 1.5 degrees increase pathway, the voluntary carbon markets would need to grow by, 15 times by 2030. No? And this is basically that we will have to, the voluntary carbon market will have to represent 1 gigaton in emission reductions in 2030 and between 3 and 4 gigatons in 2050. You know? So if you compare this to the 70 million that I was telling you about in the BCS program is a huge increase. No? Well, and I must mention, the BCS program is the leading standard in the voluntary carbon market by far. No? So going to the issue at hand here in this summit, no? What about the carbon projects? The carbon projects in the forestry sector in Europe. No, what we have seen is that at least in the BCS registry, no? If you take a look at that, you will see that we have a lot of projects registered in Europe under the BCS. From Germany to the Netherlands to Cyprus to the UK. But these registered projects are not in the AFOLU sector. No? They mostly relate to fugitive emissions from fuels, livestock emissions, manure, mining, and waste disposal, no? and energy industries too. No? So today there has been no AFOLU project registered, We have two that have started the validation process, I mean, the process to become registered. And one was in Spain, which started the process in 2012, and then we haven't heard back from them again. And the other one was recently in Romania in 2020. You know? This project in Romania is a cessation of commercial harvesting. You know? So the idea would be to increase the carbon stocks in the forest by stopping harvesting. You know? But what we have been seeing lately, I mean, on top of this Romanian project, is a lot of interest from people in Europe, no? From potential project developers in Europe, asking us, hey, why don't you have projects in Europe? Is it prohibited? Why? No, it's just a BCS policy, or what's the deal? Why don't we have any projects in Europe? No, and well, no, because at the same time, I have to say, no, in the US we have many projects in this sector. No? Most of them related to improved forest management and reforestation. No, and we have methodologies to account for this and to estimate the carbon increases, no, the removals from this project. So it's not that the methodologies are not there already to allow for these projects to happen. No? So, I mean, in the case of Europe, and the difference with the US has been basically the Kyoto Protocol. No? While the Kyoto Protocol was in place, Verra had this policy that in countries, Annex B countries, not the developed countries, countries that had a commitment under the Kyoto Protocol, could not participate in the BCS program. No? The only way, two exceptions were if the project could ensure a cancellation of assigned amount units from the government, no? So that the government wouldn't be using the same emission reduction generated by the project to comply with its own commitments, or to sell them as removal units in the protocol to other countries. No? So basically, that there would not be a double counting of the same emission reduction. Also, if you have this carbon credit created in the BCS, that there would not be an assigned amount or any other unit in the country that would be sold at the same time for the same unit. No. So that was one of the exceptions, and the other one was if the sector was not covered by the commitment, then you could have a BCS project there. No? So, but well, after the signing of the Paris Agreement, no, this has changed a bit, because, as you know, with the Paris Agreement, now all countries have commitments, but these commitments are reflected as nationally determined contributions, no, or NDCs. No? And also the Paris Agreement has this Article 6 that establishes market mechanisms that can be used in the context of the agreement. No? So in this article, no, the countries can participate in cooperative approaches and claim results internationally of internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. No, that's the name of the unit, ITMOs, from activities hosted in other countries. No? So it could happen that, for instance, you could carry out a project in Mexico and use the credits, no, the emission reductions to comply with the commitment in, I don't know, in the Netherlands. No? So the idea that the Article 6 introduces is, I mean, to ensure that double counting is avoided, Article 6 introduces what is called the corresponding adjustment, no? Which basically is, if you sell a unit, you will have to deduct that unit from your account, no? So that when the country, the buyer country uses it, you cannot use it anymore. You cannot use it for your own compliance with your NDC, no? So that's what the Article 6 includes, no? So the idea then is, well, this is the difference with the Kyoto Protocol. So now we have updated our rules, no? We, as Verra, agree that these corresponding adjustments are needed between countries so that these, two countries or more cannot account for the same unit, no, to fulfill their commitment. But the thing is that the way we see the situation here is the voluntary carbon market. Is that the voluntary carbon market action is different from what is happening in the Article 6, or what will happen in Article 6, because it's still under negotiation. I mean, the rule book is still under negotiation right now. Is that the emissions reductions and removals claimed by as offsets by, for instance, these corporate actors that have the net zero commitments or goals, are not counted towards the NDC of their country of domicile, or where they reside. So, for instance, what these companies do is they buy an offset and use it to, for their own purposes, to demonstrate compliance with their net zero commitment. But this unit is not used by the country to demonstrate the compliance under the Paris Agreement. So there is no, the emission reduction is accounted for in the country where the project is located. So in a way, it's a contribution from the buyer to the mitigation activities in the developing country, normally, where this project would happen. But this emission reduction is not used, or this unit is not used by the country where the company is residing. So there is no double counting. So in the end, this both the market mechanisms under the Paris Agreement and the voluntary market projects compensate each other, and in the end provide more mitigation. So what we did recently to reflect this is that we produced a new policy on the treatment of projects outside, in Annex 1 countries or in developed countries, And basically, what this policy requires is that the BC, that corresponding adjustments, as in the Article 6, will only be required by Verra when these are needed by the specific market. For instance, if you want to have a project that produces a credit that can be used by a country to comply with their commitment, then Verra will create a label this and add it to this unit that will say that this unit has been, has a corresponding adjustment backing it, And the way of doing this is that we will be asking the governments of these countries, for instance, the country where the project is being developed and where the unit is created, that they have to issue a letter saying that, or committing to carrying out the corresponding adjustment for the volume of credits that are being issued by Verra, and that will have this label. So we already do this for the climate, community, and biodiversity standard, but the one I was telling you about in the beginning. So when a project has been certified for both the carbon emission reductions and the other co-benefits, these units have this label saying, well, this emission reduction also represents, CCB benefits, climate, community, and biodiversity benefits. So, but for the other, in any case, in sectors and activities that are not covered by Article 6 activities, or by the Article 6, or by any other market mechanisms such as the EU ETS, these voluntary transactions can happen without requiring this label or this corresponding adjustment. So, to conclude on why, how can this, or how will this impact AFOLU projects or forestry projects in Europe? The idea is that in Europe, land use is not covered by the EU ETS. So forestry projects and agricultural projects will be eligible to issue BCUs, I mean the BCS units, without a corresponding adjustment. No? So based on this, and then also on the expected growth of the voluntary carbon market, we expect Europe to be I mean, we expect to see a significant increase in the development of projects in Europe in the coming years. Thank you, Esben.
And thank you, and thank you. It is truly interesting to see the development on the voluntary carbon market. I'm still a little bit unsure why, in history, that the relatively little has happened in Europe, and so much has happened in the US. But before we drill in Astrom, which is working with Rewilding Europe, to provide her perspective on the importance of rewilding in relation to providing a solution to the challenges we are standing. So Karin, please, you think rewilding should be an important element of forestry in Europe? Then finally, we can have some more discussions after that. Karin.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm representing Rewilding Europe and also Rewilding Sweden. And our approach to conservation is partly new. It's about letting nature take care of itself. And but sometimes we have to enable natural processing and repair damaged systems and restore. But the main message from rewilding, which is going on all over the world now, it's a rather big movement actually, is that nature can do this best. And I guess, you know, a few million years of evolution would give you that capacity. So we would like to promote pro-forestation, not plantations and these artificial systems. So pro-forestation is what we are trying to achieve. And these natural forests, we believe, and science tells us usually, and I think this has been discussed earlier in this meeting, the natural ecosystems are more resilient, and we need the resilience in this really fast moving climate change and also the other global change issues. So we believe that natural forests, rewilded or preserved, is adapting to climate change, global change. And of course, it is really interesting with credits for carbon sink and also for biodiversity. And to us, of course, this is also, you know, it's very much a matter of what criteria. I haven't heard what you've been saying all of this at Verra, but of course, this is very important. I'm from Sweden, and I know we have a very hot discussion right now about what would be sustainable forestry and what not. And also, if you take down forests for bioenergy, how long is the payback time for the carbon? Which and do we have the time to can we wait 30 years for payback after taking forests down for bioenergy? These are really hot issues in Sweden, and Rewilding Europe is working on other issues, like in areas with the deforestation has been, like in Portugal, areas now that are being just abandoned really, and the forests are coming back. We will see that there is monotonous young forest and a lot of bushes and not really forests. So there's a lack of the large herbivores, and some of them are extinct, of course, like the aurochs and stuff. But by reintroducing large herbivores, you get a forest instead of just bushes. So that is work going on. So there are different aspects of this rewilding thing. We're working with forests in South and Southern Europe and Central Europe, maybe in some areas. It's a matter of letting the forest come back and maybe make the ecosystems more complete and these keystone species back. And in the northern parts, like Sweden and Finland, there has been a dramatic change of the whole forest landscape, and restoration would be very important to make these forests resilient. And there's a lack, we're losing biodiversity all the time. So that would be, I guess, a presentation. Do you need more? I haven't heard what all of you have said, and I'm sorry, but you have a terrible connection today, Esben. Also, I didn't hear what you said really. So you'll have to tell me sign language or maybe something.
So can you hear me now?
I hear you now. Yes. Not now.
Okay,
No.
thank you. So I would like to provide an opportunity. So I can perfectly hear you. Maybe while I would like to provide an opportunity for Harald to provide his perspective. And my main question to you, Harald, is, so European forestry has traditionally and is a large economy and a large contributor to the economy in Europe, but we see relatively little investment, especially from institutional investors, into forestry today. So Harald, what do you think is the biggest challenge to drive more investment into forest and forest industry in Europe today? Or nobody heard what I said. Harald, you're muted.
There are big investments in forestry, but they are coming from the sector itself. So the pulp and paper industry is taking huge investments in new biorefineries in the last decades. I don't know what the real reason that is that institutional investors in Europe, at least, have not engaged that much in forestry. I think there is, what I mentioned in my presentation, a huge political risk. What will be the future political and legal framework to do investments in forestry, in traditional products, in new products? I think we have not developed a good framework to pay for ecosystem services, as it was mentioned by Karin. If forestry, since its establishment 250 years ago, forest management has always reacted to societal needs and policy priorities. And if they are changing and there is an economic viable approach, forestry will take up. For the moment, in most of the regions in Europe, selling timber is the dominant source of income to cover the cost for forest ownership and management. There are only very small little shares of income for hunting and maybe other ecosystem services. As long as you don't change this situation, it will be difficult to change the business case. If there are new opportunities to get payment for carbon storage, for biodiversity conservation activities, for impacting on high quality drinking water, on protecting human living space against natural hazards as it is in the mountainous areas, but there is no revenue for forest owners at the moment, I think the whole situation will change. So I think it's the lack of good financing instruments and seeing the revenues for services forests provide other than wood. And I have to add, in some regions, in particular in the Southern Europe sphere, selling mushrooms and berries is more important economically than selling timber. And there are more than 1.5 or 2 million households in the EU 27 living from selling those non-wood forest products. So there are good examples how other products and services than wood could generate revenue, but they haven't been upscaled and mainstreamed for the moment. I think the interest is coming, but it doesn't make sense to talk about the high value of nature and forestry as long as there is no market that brings revenues that can cover the cost to maintain, to own, improve, restore, adapt. This is cost, this is investment needed to adapt our forest to climate change and to restore. And at the moment, any forest owner who engages in such activities, and there are many, they finance it from the revenues from selling timber. And as long as we do not change that, it will be difficult to get more engagement by forest owners and others.
Thank you. Thank you. Indeed, yeah, somebody has to pay for sure. Karin, can you provide example today or good example for where there are or more rewilding based investment cases in Europe? Is there any good examples?
Investment cases, I would say what Rewilding Europe is working with in Southern Europe is mainly investments leading to more nature tourism, actually. The nature tourism is the biggest revenue coming in from these areas. So that is, that's about the only thing. And of course, there's a lot of going into this rewilding, there's a lot of public money, of course, on the EU life projects and stuff like that. But in the long run, it's mainly for now, it is making, big tourism lodges and having guided tours and all that happening. And also the local economy, they get new guests and they buy the local food and things like that. So it's based pretty much on tourism.
But is there a case? Is there a business case? Like for the landowner, can they make the money?
Yeah. The landowner do make money. It's very different. But in these areas, usually the landowner will build the lodges, and they have the tourists coming in, and they have the guides and the extra activities all around it. So it's the landowners do get it. But I mean, these are smaller activities. It's not like you buy a whole big area, one landowner. But to the local economy, this is important. And the tourism sector is growing all the time. We all know that. Or before the corona thing, and nature tourism is a big expanding part of that. And we also see that in the boreal forests, that nature tourism is very important, creating a lot of work opportunities in rural areas where we don't have that much anymore from forestry, of course, mechanication. There's not so many people working in the forestry sector anymore. So it is important, but it's not this big scale, of course. I would also like to comment on this with the market opportunity and payments for other ecosystem services. In the boreal forest region, there's a lot of people counting on different types of forestry methods, of course. And the Finnish are, I think, leading. Professor Pukula has been counting. And so there's also a possibility, I think, that the forestry will develop to more to the continuous cover forestry business, which would make it possible to also have other incomes from other ecosystem services, and also able to combine this with tourism and others that we do not get now with the clear cut. Nobody wants to see that.
Thanks. I've been told to shut off my video for a lack of bandwidth. Manuel, a question for you in relation to carbon credits. So these developments on Article 6 and the corresponding adjustments, do you think that would be sufficient to start driving forestry as an opportunity in relation to voluntary carbon markets, or is there any other structural differences between, for instance, the US market and the European market that is a barrier towards providing more opportunity in relation to carbon credits? You're on mute.
Thanks. No, what I was saying is that without being an expert on the US carbon markets, and I'm very familiar with the European ones, is that, I mean, what we're seeing is that there is a lot of interest from potential project developers in Europe, and they think that there are no enough incentives from governments in general, to promote these activities. I mean, from afforestation to sustainable forest management, and also the agricultural activities, those that increase carbon in soils mainly, So in that sense, I mean, even in political times that were difficult for climate change in the US, we have seen over time a lot of interest and a lot of developments. No, for instance, we have seen that in the US, I mean, there have even projects related to wetlands, which are not easy to monitor and to estimate in terms of emissions and carbon stocks and so on. So in the case of Europe, I mean, this has always been an issue, a known issue that the European community do not really support the use of carbon credits from the land use sector for compliance. No, and they have never allowed them in the EU ETS because of methodological and political reasons. No? So I mean, what we have seen lately in the last years, no, is that, for instance, there has been some flexibility within the European Union not to include carbon credits in the market, but at least to allow countries to use some of the removals that they achieve in this sector to comply with their commitments. So there is this linkage between the regulations of the land use sector and the regulation on the sectors outside the EU ETS. No, that is, I mean, where countries can use a certain part of the cap. No, they have a cap on the level of.
I think we are. Manuel, I think we are running out of time.
Okay.
Thank you again for your contribution. I don't know how much time we have left, but maybe I would allow Harald to provide your perspective on you said that there is need for more investment, and you said, yeah, there is a lot of investment, but those investments are for industry itself. I think that's very promising, but taking aside the political risk and the headline risk of that we're seeing, I would challenge, if you look at forestry investment generally, even before forestry became such a hot potato in Europe, we've seen relatively little investment into Europe compared to the US. Forestry investment has been a very well-established industry in the US for some 30 years now. Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, as well as in Latin America, especially in Brazil, Uruguay, and Chile. If you look at the institutional ownership of forestry and forest assets in those regions, they are much, much higher than Europe, while in Europe we have probably some of the most advanced forest industry, but very little investment into the actual asset class itself. So taking aside, and I fully support your argument that it is a problem that forestry has become such a hot potato, but taking that aside, why do you think forestry investments in Europe has seen relatively little influx of investments for the last few decades? And do you think there is something that could be overcome, and what do you think would be needed to overcome that?
Think about the ownership structure in Europe. There are 16 million forest owners, and this is quite a diverse group of people. In the northern countries, you have a strong vertical integration of forest ownership with the downstream industries. Big wood industries are owning the forest, whereas in the rest of Europe, you have a clear separation between ownership and downstream processing. So that weakens a little bit let's say, the industrial and investment view. On the other hand, people are investing in their forests with a lot of private money, private activity, and also public money coming from the rural development funds. But I agree with you, there is a lack of institutional investors engaging in a broad sense of top services and products forests can provide. The only tip of peak of investment in the last year was because of the bioeconomy development, where in particular the pulp and paper industry was very well located to take on board big investments to expand in that direction. But I think it will need more incentives for everybody to really engage in forestry in the long term, and not only in wood processing and wood generation. But these incentives are missing, and this is political incentive, legal incentive, and financial incentives.
Thank you. I think we are out of time. If there's no burning things that the panelists is interested to saying, I think we have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for your contributions. I believe, from my point of view, forestry in Europe stands on the cusp of really making a difference. And in relation to both the rewilding and providing biodiversity benefits, as well as being part of the bioeconomy and a circular bioeconomy, is areas that really needs to be addressed, and really try to see whether or not we can accomplish this going forward is really a big challenge that I think everybody involved needs to step up to and see what they can be done. Thank you again for the panelists. I think I will cut now, and I hope you continue participating in the conference. Thank you.